This is the story of Brainy the RPG cat, and in many ways it's a very typical story. One day an old man found a stray kitten in a library, and he chose to keep it as a mascot, and to keep him in gentle company. But this was no ordinary old man, for he was Bosch, the High Elf headmaster of the Library of Dinah, a very not ordinary library dedicated to the goddess of all living knowledge. And before long, Bosch would learn that this was also no ordinary cat.
Hello.
Learning that the cat was intelligent, the wizard took it upon himself to teach him to read and write, and learn history and the ways of magic. He was quite taken with the lessons he got from games using cards and dice. And soon the cat grew into an adult, a scholar, a full-fledged wizard in his own right, and once and forever one of the most dedicated librarians in Denier. The wizard bestowed upon him a name in the tradition of all cat people. He who astounds with his immediately brilliant ideas. But the library wizards have taken to calling him Brainy the RPG cat. And let me tell you, it hasn't been a bed of roses.
Brainy the cat. Brainy the RPG cat. It's a kitty cat.
Hello, cats and kittens, felines and felidae, humans and variant humans, on every race, class, and subclass. Welcome to another episode of Brainy the RPG Cat. Tonight, we're going to be reading more of Blight's Richard Pratt's Crooked City. And, yeah, once again, I should have gotten the URL before I started, so I'm going to start putting that up there. Drive-through RPG. Yeah. I get a lot through drive-through RPG. If I get enough regular viewers, then I think I would like to try to see if I can get them as a potential sponsor. Let's see. Oh. I think I did mean the Blight. Yes, thank you very much. That was a real Butterfingers typing that I did just now. All right. All right, so tonight's stream, as always, is brought to you by the Well of the Worlds Kickstarter. The Well of the Worlds, a new module for Prowlers and Paragons from Michael Serbrook, Random Alternius, and Mobius Worlds Publishing. Be sure to be signed up for the mailing list so that you can be there when the Kickstarter officially launches on April the 4th. Okay, so we do have a lot of book to get to tonight, so let's not dilly-dally a little bit too much. And so let me see. So I think last time we left off on this page of character quirks. We only did give a small amount of credence to the discussion of the GM guide backgrounds previously. And so we've been going through this book, and we've had a bit of a mixed response to it so far. After looking towards the characters, our biggest gripe so far has been just kind of a little bit of an overt use of race over background, and particularly 2 or 3 races that, well, while they're good for the theming of the street of the of this area, which is supposed to be Richard Blight's Crooked City, they nonetheless don't provide much of an incentive for roleplay. But we'll have that on now. You know, the first thing we'll do is we'll go and take a look at the Blight, and we'll follow that up by looking at the setting and, you know, many of the concepts which have allowed this to thrive as a independent book, great independent replacement book for a game in 5e. So, additional Blight character quirks. Abandoned to live on the streets as a child. You grew up tough. You have abandonment issues that hamper your ability to develop out company if possible. Optional: when alone, you begin to panic and might succeed on a DC 10 wisdom save or become frightened. Alley child. The narrow defines and ginnels were your childhood playground and home. Wide open spaces are panic-inducing and make you extremely uncomfortable. You must succeed on a DC 10 wisdom saving throw or become frightened in a wide open space. It is strange because there are really strong background templates. Yeah, and so a significant amount of this game really is just kind of based on the use of background. So the fact that there's just a significant amount of particular character quirks that were placed in the racial bracket is, you know, just makes me scratch my head a little bit. But, well, once again, you know, any RPG manual is an RPG manual that you can potentially make your own. So in that respect, you know, you can go ahead and you can just drag a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be there into background if you feel like you need to. Let me see. Almost killed. You fell in the line, were hit by a runaway, broken, or undead horse, or fell from a building. You have odd nightmares about the event that somehow manifest themselves in the dream of others that find it impossible to save you. Apprentices, you were raised by tradesmen, you have a keen understanding of tools and crafting. Consult your GM to determine what trade you are adept at. An artist, quarter born, you were raised or spent some considerable time in the crazy and creative district of the artist quarter. You have done everything you can to stay out of the way of the 3 major factions, and were once invited to join the cult of the self-blinded angel. Maybe the reliance on racial talent details is a holdout from older revisions. Yeah, and so, yeah, we did also talk pretty significantly about that. You know, there's a good amount that, you know, since this book was previously written in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 and preceding that was also a book in Pathfinder that there were just a significant amount of things that were ported from the other books that, you know, were just additional to what is particularly necessary in 5e. Probably most glaringly is that this book, you know, did have a version of the Dwergar. The Dwergar were, well, you know, very prominent race in 5e, but not until we kind of get into the area of the second phase of book releases, which I believe happened around 2015. So, anyway. The bastard nobility, you bear the hallmarks of an aristocrat's bastard. You can mingle easier than others with different castes and can call upon an aristocrat that is known to you for a favor. The between marked, whilst very young, a nightmare from between somehow manifested itself and scarred you. You're deeply affected by the experience and cannot abide being near minors. If you come within 20... Oh, well, not minors. Mirrors. Very tiny text. Sorry about that. If you come within 20 feet within a mirror, you have to succeed a DC 20 wisdom save or become frightened. The boat child. You have grown up on the banks of the Sister Lime and even swum her depths for dares. You're more comfortable in the water than on land. The Booktown born. You were raised or spent some considerable time in Booktown. You are privy to secrets whispered among the stacks and shelves of the cavernous libraries of Booktown. Body Harvest. You're quite the entrepreneur and have established yourself as the go-to source for the highest quality cuts of meat. Your customers are cadaver surgeons, homuncule wives, golem stitchers, and others in the market for body parts, cadavers, and sometimes even something alive. Born in the Barnacle. You're raised among the nests and tunnels of the Barnacle. You know the tunnels and tight winding streets better than most, and you can move through the great docks unhindered. There's a chance you know some information about a shady deal or two. Born to beer slops, you're raised in the gin houses and taverns. You know the best dives in the Blight and just so happen to have a legendary thirst that causes tavern keepers to groan when you walk through the door. Brine touched. There is some briny in your family, a gift that your mother and father tried to hide. Your fingers and toes are webbed and you can hold your breath for twice as long as average. Brothel waif, the channel of a harlot from the Crimson Lantern. You have grown up hardened, independent, and tough. You have a soft spot for those in the trade and seek to aid them whenever possible. If you witness a prostitute being mistreated or abused, you will surely step in and aid them. Capital born, you're raised or spent some considerable time in the capital. You have unique insight into the gossip and politics of this dangerous quarter. You might even know a secret way to the capital. The child of a famous beauty, your mother and father was famous in the city for their looks. However, you were often left alone when young and suffered from nightmare. To this day, night terrors persist. You have to succeed on a DC 10 wisdom check before attempting to sleep. Chimney sweep, when young, you were small and used for cleaning chimneys of the wealthy or those of the capitals. You can always find the best hiding places, but confined spaces are terrifying. When you are in a confined space, you must succeed at a DC 10 wisdom save or become frightened. Choir child, you have an incredible singing voice, but the brutal training regimen you have endured at the hands of your cruel choir teacher has left you scarred and traumatized. What is that very recent movie with J.K. Simmons and his very strict brass band instrument? That is effectively, the trauma that you would endure if you were one of the members of that movie. Circus X. You ran away to join the circus. A colorful life of traveling through a festival and arts quarter followed, punctuated by trips to other parts of the city. Interestingly, your closest contacts can be found in the Great Fae, possibly within members of the family. Cruel kin, cruel parents or relatives raised you, and you left home early. You're independent and misanthropic, and you have a cruel streak that you try very hard but fail to control. A devotee of Mother Grace, very religious parents who found great solace in the order of things in the Church of Mother Grace, raised you. If someone blasphemes against Mother Grace within your hearing, you feel compelled to educate the blasphemer, succeed on a DC 12 wisdom saving throw, or act in an overzealous manner against the blasphemer. Whiplash, where he's the drumming teacher? I believe so, yeah. I think it was also, well, that he was a choir leader, and then he was also just an extremely strict conductor. I think that's kind of what the point of that was. Definitely one of those trying to compel the academy into your seriousness as an actor types of movies. It was a brutal movie. It was very good, though. Yes. Festival born, you were raised or spent some considerable time in festival, but were not tainted. As you move freely upon the lycanthropy inflicted locals, at some point in your life, you catch the attention of the rat queen who is still interested in you. The foundling, you're abandoned as a baby, but found. There is something distinctly odd about you. This could be a physical thing such as a minor deformity, an extra finger, a mismatched eye color, or simply an odd air about you. Freak show touched. You were raised in a freak show and became close to many acts. You have developed a very meaningful relationship, possibly romantic, with the star of one of these shows. Hello, Queen Vampiress. Thank you very much for tuning into the stream. Let me see. A Gable child. You spent your days up in the Gables where the air was clear and there was always more to see. You know the best purchase to watch the residents of the Blight and often see things not intended to be seen. Gable Master's child, your father was one of the brave Gable Masters who kept the rooftops open, clean, safe, and free from spiders. You have utmost familiarity with the rooftops of the city and can often find the quickest and easiest path through the city using the rooftops. Guild child, you are raised as part of a guild and have a benefactor looking out for you. At some point, when you are most in need, there is a chance your benefactor will aid you. On a roll of 96 to 100 on a percentile dice, your benefactor will come to your aid in a manner determined by the game master. Guild-bound family, your family is blighted by an agreement they made to a guild before you're born. Because of this, you're constantly fearful of being held accountable for your family's mistakes. Optional, succeed on a DC 12 wisdom check anytime you encounter a member of the guild. Haunted by between seems somehow to be able to follow you around. Every so often you hear noises no one else does. Feel someone move behind you or a reflection in the corner of a mirror that cannot be there. You are inherently between touched. Succeed on a DC 12 wisdom save or become frightened when hearing noises that others do not. Heidling, for reasons unknown only to you, you have chosen to mask your mixed racial heritage. Forsaking one for the other, you emphasize the ancestry that's most common human in the Blight and excel at hiding in plain sight. Hollow Hillsborn, you were raised and spent some considerable time in the hallowed and holy places of the Hollow and Broken Hills. You can move freely among the inhabitants of these areas and have explored every inch of the Great Blight Cemetery. The Jumbleborn, you are raised or spent some considerable time in the Jumble. Because of this, you're paranoid and untrusting, always lamenting that you are being watched, and you might be right. Kissed by angels, some people are born lucky, and you're one of them. Cats sit in your lap, children stop crying and laugh when you enter a room, and frosty discussions thaw when you begin to talk. Some petty people find such lucky folk annoying and become jealous of them. Link child, when younger, you worked the dark streets of the city as a Link boy or a girl. Your night vision is excellent and you have an almost sixth sense when operating in the darkness. You find daylight unpleasant and prefer to wear timed lens when the sun is at its highest. Messenger, when younger, you were hired by one of the many messenger guilds in the city to pass messages in haste. You know the fastest routes throughout all of the city. Mill child, you spent much of your childhood working in one of the many mills of the city. Worker safety was not a priority of the overseas in the mills. You bear the marks of having been involved in an industrial accident of some kind. One of many, there are 1d6 other children in your family. You have a very high likelihood of encountering one of your siblings at any given time within the Blight. These encounters can be cordial or hostile. The choice is yours. Orphan, raised by an overseer, your early life was incredibly tough. You bear the physical and psychological scars of the experience. You have vowed to save as many orphans as you can. How you choose to do this is up to you. Out from the asylum. You don't know how you escaped intact, but you did. You've been to the city of golems and lived to tell through it, albeit with a notable alteration to your body. You have undergone a transformation at the hands of a cadaver surgeon, homuncule wife, or a golem stitcher. Work with your DM to determine something noticeable that has been altered about your character. So you're saying, ooh. Specifically, which one of the quirks gave you an ooh? Let me see. Utilize this treatment. Okay. River child, you're raised in a boat town along the river. You speak river cant as if it were your native language. You know the right folk to talk to in the boat towns that are ever present within the city, and always seem to have the best information about going-ons in the neighborhoods. Seminarian, you were born or raised in the seminary. You have seen the true horror of the ghastly experimentations that take place in the academic bastion at the foot of the Capitol. You rarely make it through the night without waking in a sweat, screaming at the horror you cannot forget. The seventh child of a seventh child. There's something decidedly odd about you. Odd things happen around you, and occasionally unpredictable events occur. Cats bristle and flee from you. Plates fall on floors when you enter a room, or when the clock strikes 13. This does not have a mechanical effect, and your GM should weave it into your character's story from time to time. Sewer brat. You spend a lot of time in the underneath, either as a runner for a guild, someone you ran away from home, or the orphanage that you were raised in, or some other story you deem appropriate. You have a sixth sense that allows you to navigate the sewers of the Blight better than most others. A sideshow touched. You were raised in a carnival sideshow and became close to many acts. You can move amongst the sideshow workers as if you were still one of them. You have a special affinity with many of them, and are often given the best rumors and tales. Sinks born, you were raised or spent some considerable time in the sinks. When you were younger, curiosity got the best of you, telling you to venture down to the Great Lake. You've seen things, terrifying things, and you know these stories to be true. Sinister theatrics. You were raised or spent considerable time in the theater Sinister. You will never admit it, but you very well could have the ear of Eris Maxwell or one of his liars. Sorrowful. You have mixed heritage but struggle to understand why you feel you're missing something crucial to your makeup. Your parents' differences are too much to overcome after the love and lust faded. You favor the parent that raised you, but are cursed with an unnaturally long life or a fleetingly short life in comparison to your parent. I like the thought of that. It's so natural. I can't believe I never thought of doing a circus performer adventure. I think I've done at least one. It is fun, particularly if the theme accommodates for it. And it is really a great premise for a character, particularly something like a bard that has a high level of charisma. Strange relations. Someone in your family line is an anomaly, a hint of an elf, the touch of a gnome, the flicker of a halfling. Exactly how and where this came from is a mystery. Your character is slightly odd in a hard-to-define way. This is not a mechanic, but a story option. Perhaps the PC has a luxuriant dwarvish beard, slightly pointed ears, or woolly feet that indicate that somewhere far back something odd happened in the family. Street waif. You were raised by the hard streets of Casseridge and have learned how to survive. You made an enemy, however, and that enemy is looking for you. Work with your GM to develop this twist for you accordingly, and then weave it onto your ongoing story. Okay. 13th child of a 13th child. There is something decidedly wrong about you, and not all of it good. Strange effects follow your character. These are only minor, but decidedly strange. Horses keel over and die in the street when you walk by. A pirate beetle lamp goes out. You find two-headed silver coins. A plummeting magpie crashes into a wall as you walk past. Life, in short, continues to throw oddities about you. That's a lot of kids. Well, not necessarily as bad in terms of all of the ones who have a lot of siblings, but still, interesting concepts. Once again, interesting concepts for a background. These are just quirks that are particularly added on to the background section of where you would play on 5e. So, Toil Town born. You're raised or spent some considerable time in Toil Town. You know where to go when the illicit services are offered in Toil Town. You fellow Eastenders remain loyal and true to you, aiding you when you most needed. When you ever encounter a slaver, you must succeed at a DC 12 William save or confront them, often violently. Touched by the unseen. When young, you were taken to the unseen, and it had a profound and unsettling effect upon you. The unseen calls you, and you find it oddly consoling to have objects or even odd things from the mundane sea about your home or your person. There's something oddly clammy and brackish about you. The Town Bridge-born. You're raised or spent some considerable time in Townbridge and consider yourself a Townbridge local. You despise the Crown, Prince, Justice, Cornlord, and the ruthless landlords that act in his stead in Townbridge. You have vowed to bring them all down. The wicked stepsisters. The wicked stepsisters who delighted in using you as little more than a slave raised you. This made you resilient if sad when young. That sad resilience has shaped your personality into one that is hardened and serious. You have very little tolerance of frivolity. Or a wild child, you were feral as a child. Your feral nature remains with you and impacts your relationships with civilized blighters. Okay. So let me see. New equipment. Equipment and things to part you from your lucre. Casterage goods. A short walk in the Blight avails one of the sheer volume of goods for sale, from Arkel, Budge and Sons gentlemen outfitters to Zinn, Ripple, and Wade pipe makers to the aristocracy. The wares are advertised across every available space. No wall is without a painted sign or a hoarding tender. Sandwich boards are carried down at their heels, meant to earn a tenner, and the shop windows often show elaborate displays of wares. With so many people in such a small place, competition is stiff, and beyond their gaudy adverts, traders stop at nothing to be the best and the richest in the city-state. Weapons of the Blight, along with most other weapons, the following new weapons, are used by the denizens of Casterhage. Weapon qualities. Misfire. The increased power or configuration of some crossbows can result in a misfire. If the natural result of your attack roll is equal to less than the weapon's misfire value, the shot misses even if you would have otherwise hit the target, and the crossbow cannot be used again until a person proficient in the use of the weapon spends a full round action to restore it to working order. Magical repeating crossbows will still misfire on a natural one. Magical non-repeating crossbows will not misfire, even on a natural one. So, weapon descriptions. The Bellstaff Corophagy, a simple walking staff made of hornbeam or some other hardwood, capped with a curving arm, from which dangles a small bell. When the staff is carried, the bell rings, resulting in disadvantages on dexterity checks. The Corophagy and sometimes the lepers or other deceased individuals typically use these staves to give warning to their approach to others, so they can be well away before they can reach them. In the hands of a Corophagy or other individual proficient in its use, the bell staff is a potent weapon. The proficient user of a Corophagy bell staff can flip the bell up and against the arm it hangs, so that the clapper is held still and the bell no longer rings to cause disadvantage on stealth checks. You can then flip it down as well, so that it returns to ringing as normal. A non-proficient user can perform the same maneuvers as move actions that provide attacks of opportunity. Broadsword, heavier, shorter blade than a longsword, 2.5 to 3 feet in length. Claymore is a heavier, longer version of the greatsword. It's 4.5 to 5 feet in length. The heavier weight of this devastating weapon contributes to it doing additional damage. A stout leather crop, is used to spur on a mount or punish a peasant. A loaded crop is a crop with the shaft, and in which the shaft and head has been weighted with a lead to provide some additional heft. A kosh, a small, flexible club, also known as a blackjack, consists as a leather-wrapped lead weight attached to the end of a wooden shaft via a leather-wrapped coil spring. And so these are just a significant amount of very urbanized versions. And something that's pretty significant is that as much as I have read this, I have not seen any particular stat sheets for it. So search me the difference between these and standardized weapons in 5e. The folding kosh folds to make it easily comfortable. It can be unfolded as a bonus action. A gentleman's version, a handy weapon for the descending person of quality to have in a tight spot or in the rugged streets, is usually rimmed with metal and is easily transportable in a handy leather holder. Arbalest crossbow, because of the size and weight of the heavy crossbow, you attack at disadvantage with it if you're not wearing an arbalest harness. The increased power of the arbalest crossbow tends to make it misfire. If the result of your attack bow with an arbalest crossbow is a natural one, the shot misses even if you would have otherwise hit the target, and the crossbow cannot be used again until an action is used to restore it to working order. Folding crossbow, smaller light crossbow that can be folded down to make it more easily concealable or disguisable. Unlike other weapons of its size, you can attempt to conceal a folding crossbow upon your body. It can be assembled as a standard action. The gentleman's version, de rigueur, all fashionable or aristocratic shoots and hunts, is always a masterwork quality, usually inlaid with precious metals, and always comes collapsed in its own velvet lined carry cases. So it's only just that I scrolled up that I did start to see all of the stat blocks. So I rescind my previous criticism. The configuration of the folding crossbow tends to make it misfire. The result of your attack bow with a folding crossbow is a natural 1. The crossbow cannot be used again until an action is used to restore it to working order. A magical folding crossbow has no chance of misfiring. A folding crossbow is treated as if it were a light crossbow. Folding hand crossbow can be folded down to make it even more concealable or disguisable. It can be disassembled as a standard action. Yeah, and then once again, the misfire rules apply to that. A recurve crossbow is a light crossbow modified with the power of a heavy crossbow at a shorter range. You draw a recurve crossbow back by pulling a lever called a canakin. A recursive crossbow fires crossbow bolts. The repeating arbalist crossbow functions identically to an arbalist crossbow, except that it does not need to be reloaded after firing a single bolt. It has a magazine capacity of 6 bolts and a rate of fire of 2 bolts per round. You must be wearing an arbalist harness to use the repeating arbalist crossbow. The repeating heavy crossbow functions identically to a heavy crossbow, except it does not need to be reloaded after firing, but it has a capacity of 8 bolts and a rate of fire of 2 bolts per round. You must be wearing an arbalist harness. Crossbow, a repeating recurve. This weapon functions identically to a repeating heavy crossbow, except that its damage and range values are equivalent to those of a recursive crossbow, as a magazine capacity of 10 bolts and a rate of fire of 2 bolts per round. And then the razor wheel, a weapon made from a thin sheet of scrap metal has been fashioned into a circular shape and given a serrated edge. A wooden handle is set in its center at a perpendicular angle so it can be gripped with a blade parallel to the wielder's arm and used in battle as a slashing weapon. They also specify the Chorophagi as using this weapon as well. Let's see. Blight gear. A chemical solvent, bubbling gel, eats through adhesives, alchemist glue, can be used to restrain a target. Cage pyre beetle, a small portable cage capable of holding up to 5 pounds of pyre beetles, which I just assume are beetles that are on fire. An ever-burning candle, an otherwise normal candle that has a continual flame spell cast on its wick. An ever-burning lamp, oil lamps bearing a continual flame spell that functions in all ways as an ever-bearing torch. Gable bridge clockwork, similar to a clockwork ladder. A gable bridge extends to 20 feet in length at the pull of a lever, enabling it to be used as a bridge provided support is available at both ends. An arbalist harness. This is worn over armor or normal clothing used to provide support for the use of an arbalist crossbow. The clockwork ladder, a collapsible ladder made up to extend up to 20 feet in length in a single round. Activating a clockwork ladder is equivalent to a move action. Why is there a word for that? When someone or something is usually strange is mentioned to the assumption that you already know what it is. Well, I mean, so supposedly we already know what it is because, we read through the character and the background lore sections. But, yeah. If properly, so the second sentence in that one goes, if properly cared for and fed, pyre beetles can survive in these cages up for a week. It might be it might even just be that's an alternate lighting source. I don't know. Maybe we'll get to it in a moment. Oh, actually, they get to it within, 2 other sections here. The pyre beetle lantern comes equipped with a fireproof wire cage capable of holding a pound of pyre beetles in its interior and built-in reflectors to magnify its light equal to that of a torch. The live pyre beetle, cockroach-like beetles that give an extremely handy carapace and produce a natural slow-burning oil from glands within their bodies. Alphabetism, I think, just kind of seems to be more dominant in this book more than, just hierarchy of explanation. They're not specially incendiary, but burn readily if exposed to fire. Typically, they're set alight after being held within a small fireproof cages or bags of tough fibers. A pound of burning pyre beetles emits light in a 10-foot radius, but reflectors mounted on street lamps or within lanterns doubles this area to equal to that of a torch. A pound of live pyre beetles burns with largely smokeless fire for 12 hours. A single live pyre beetle is sufficient to provide a light source, quickly burning out and crumbling. Burning pyre beetles are not suitable to use as flaming weapons because they do not burn particularly hot and are ready to crumble to ash if treated too roughly while they're burning. The carcasses of pyre beetles can be lit for use as a light source. They give off the same illumination as live pyre beetles, but the oil-producing glands of a pyre beetle break down immediately after death. A pound of pyre beetle carcasses burn for only 2 hours. A single pyre beetle carcass is insufficient to provide a light source, quickly burning out and crumbling. I would never have been so rough on the little beetles. Well, necessity is the mother of invention in this, intentionally dismal and depressing setting. They sound like fun pets in a funny way. Well, I'm sure the people who cultivate them for use in lanterns and so on are particularly very kind to them. Okay. And a sick-like cockroach, small pale gray roaches that give off a soft grayish light, equal in illumination to a candle when it's awake. They eat garbage and if properly cared for will live for a year or more. They also give off a distinctive unpleasant odor, so anyone carrying one or more of these has disadvantage on stealth checks or when within olfactory range. Silk-like cockroaches have a hard chitinous shell and 1 hit point. If their shells pierce, the cockroaches explode, similar to an alchemist's fire, although only dealing 1 point of fire damage to the square where the explosion occurs, and no splash damage to surrounding squares. However, they do burn for 1 round thereafter and deal 1 additional point of fire damage. So flammable, cockroaches and structures can easily be set by such an explosion. The conditions are known to start many small fires in Toil Town and in the hovels along the Great Lime River. Fortunately, cumulative exploding silk-like cockroaches do not cause additional damage or duration of burning. However, if many of them explode in a single square, they will still only deal a total of 1 point of fire damage, and for another point of fire damage on the following round before they burn out. For this reason, they have found no practical applications as weapons, although they can be used as detonators. A silk-like sconce. This is a small candle going to bring tin, brass, or some other non-flammable substance. A candle holder potion has a wire covering and allows space for a single silk-like cockroach to be placed within. Beneath this is a connected repository that can hold a small amount of organic garbage upon which the caged cockroach can feed. As long as the food repository is kept stocked with garbage and the sconce is shielded, a silk-like cockroach can live in the sconce for about a year or more. A silk-like sconce can be set on a table or other surface as a candle stand or mounted to a wall. And so they also have a candelabra that is a sconce that has multiple chambers, a vermin repellent, this vile smelling paste that can be spread on the skin to keep vermin at bay, a Gable Master's kit, specialized kits for the spider hunting Gable Masters that dare to venture across the spires and the rooftops of Casterhage. This kit includes crampons, pitons, and other tools found in the climber's kit. So these are just, basically kits. For the specific types of classes that we've already gone over, the Gable Master's kit, the Mortician's kit, the Rat Catcher's kit for those brave enough to risk hunting dire rats and were rats within the city, a second story harness, series of traps, trusses, and buckles that can be worn over clothing or armor, and allows the wearer to secure herself in place using a move action on a vertical surface so both of their hands are free. And the surgeon's kit, various types of scissors, needles, forceps, clamps, scalpels, probes, necessary to perform most common types of surgery. Okay, so animals, mounts, and related gear. Canary, animal sentinel, a broken animal, a broken creature, a cage, a camel, a canary, a dog, an elephant that is combat trained, and a Heim. Okay. An animal sentinel, a normal animal used to detect hazards before they can affect the animal's owner, literally the canary in the coal mine. Broken animal, these sell for 10 times their standard value, so a broken heavy horse costs 2,000 GP. Animals come with a focus, a command word, or a command item. The most common broken animals are performing monkeys, or a broken creature of intellect. These sell for 300 GP. A broken troll would then cost 10,000 GP. So, gosh, effectively, what they're suggesting is, in terms of broken animals, they're talking about animals that are highly trained and therefore more valuable as a result of being trained. But then they're also, suggesting that there are actually some semi-intelligent races like trolls that are also broken and sold in the exact same way. Camel, used as a mount or pack animal, a common trained camel can be ridden into combat without danger. A fighting dog, a terrier, or see the Tome of Blighted Horrors by Frog God Games, which is, just a different module by the same company. An elephant trained as a mount or a pack animal, a combat-trained elephant can be ridden into combat without danger. Read the game for details on mounted combat and for more information on elephants. And the Heim is an unpleasant but loyal draft animal detailed further in the Blight Bestiary. Okay, so then they just have a completely separate section for this itemized section that you can read about how animals are trained. Bilges, a horse or other dray animal, pulls a 30 to 100 foot long ship. It is 10 feet wide and has a living space. Sometimes the whole boat is given over to a living area, but costs are tripled for such vessels. In general, they travel at a mile an hour along the city's lock-leading canalways and 2 miles an hour on rivers. Okay. A caravan, they're using the G word again. I forget what we're replacing the G word with. But anyways, richly decorated and enclosed wagon used for living and travel. A family of 4 can easily live in a caravan. They are almost always driven by a single horse. Fancy carriage, traveler works. Yeah. A fancy carriage, a 4-wheeled luxurious transport able to carry as many as 4 passengers, and leather-clad luxury. Often details are added to the carriage, such as potion stores, armored doors, and magical accessories. Installing these in the carriage costs 1.5 times as much as a normal object. For example, installing a chest into a carriage would cost 2 gold points and 2 silver points. A heavy waxed fisherman's coat. Heavy long coat made of canvas and carefully waxed to seal against moisture. Because of its excellent insulating qualities, it grants advantage on constitution saves against exposure to cold weather, and it can be worn over light armor. Or a kef, a thin black full-face scarf. It is light enough with a loose enough weave to be worn in the summer months without being stifling or having limited vision, but provides some protection against biting flies. Insectum container, fancy. Insectum container, armored. A luxury level scrip. A small decorative pouch or wallet for carrying small amounts of coins and important papers or calling cards. Scrip, plain as above without decoration. Tantalus lock, walnut. A tantalus lock for a liquor bottle encased in walnut. The lock can be picked with a successful DC 15 dexterity check. Boiling death lice, a failed experiment in the development of insectum. These bites are alchemically enhanced lights inject a potent toxin that boils the victim's blood. Typically, they're kept in a flask that is thrown at the victim. As it hits, the flask breaks and a swarm of lice emerges to the victim. A creature subjected to this poison must succeed in a successful DC 13 Constitution saving throw, or take 9 2d8 poison damage, and are poisoned for up to 1 minute. The creature can repeat the saving throw at its beginning of each of its turn. On each success of a failed save, the creature takes a 4 1d8 poison damage. After 3 consecutive successful saves, the poison ends. And then boiling death toxin, harvested from the alchemically enhanced boiling death lice. This version of the toxin has been concentrated into an ingestible or injury poison that can be applied to weapons. A creature subjected to the boiling death lice toxin must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, it takes 18 4d8 poison damage and is poisoned for 24 hours. So now, insectum. Insects are everywhere in the Blight. A peculiarity even for the wisest find difficult to explain. In summer, the night air bolts with them, and even in the depths of winter, a hive of enormous elephant cockroaches may be seen huddling behind a hearth, or a black bat mouth fluttering around a pyre lantern's glow in the snow. The Blight, which is host to many unique species, seems to nurture them, and many grow to uncommon, even giant sizes. They even have an alarming habit of forming swarms that, if not dealt with, may amass in quantities large enough to kill domestic animals and even people. The preponderance of large and unique insects, as well as other type of vermin in the city, has led to a unique industry that combines alchemy, toxicology, pardon me, and insect husbandry to produce a range of alchemically enhanced drug-like insect venoms. The purpose-bred species that result are known as insectum, and their use is highly controlled by the corrupt and ruthless Insectum Guild, which uses licenses to only a handful of official dealers to collude on supply, and who respond swiftly to spikes in demand with commensurable price rises. A host of illegal street dealers fill out the market for Insectum, but most are unpredictable in quality, with many of these disreputable dealers selling inferior, sick, or even dangerous Insectum. While guild members are not spotless, the value of their official status and a fixed address tends to ensure that their products cannot be relied upon. An insectum is typically used by an ingestion or an injury by eating it or applying its bite or sting, sometimes to a particular body area, where it may remain attached for the duration of its effects. Usually the user must willingly succumb to an effects of a toxin in order to also benefit from the alchemical boon it contains. Insectum are sold live and sterile and die within a week of purchase. An insectum must be alive when used and, unless otherwise detailed, dies once it's been used. The price reflects a single dose of insectum. So, effectively, yeah, these are just properties that can be added to you as a result of getting bitten by a specific type of insect. So angry, let me see, injury, contact, infested, injury. So that's the way that the insectum from each one of the bug types is administered. Boiling death likes poison. And types of insectum: finger lice, firebite lice, gadfly ambrosia, great snakefly, howling nightshade grub, hungering wasp grub, joyous scarab, Jubb's navel lice. Oh, actually, yeah, these are all detailed below as well. Angry Weevil, the black and red giant weevil, injects a toxin that deals 1d4 points of damage and causes the user to fly into an uncontrollable fury for 1 minute. Ossip Scarabus, the bite of this golden scarab, contains a poison that causes 3 1d6 points of poison damage plus disadvantage on charisma-based checks. Okay. Good night, Queen Vampiress. Thank you very much for tuning in to the stream. Alright. So, Bite Spider. The bite of the spider injects a toxin that causes the user to have disadvantage on charisma-based checks and causes the user's skin to gradually harden over the course of 1 minute, at which the user cannot have an AC less than 14 for 1 hour. Blake's Sanguis Saga. When this is modeled down, brown leech is first attached. The user must succeed on a DC 14 Constitution saving throw or be incapacitated for 1 minute. Bloat Fly. Consuming a 2-inch long fly provides a medium or smaller creature sufficient nutrition for 1 day. Callous Fleas. The bites of these fleas cause the user's skin to gradually harden over the course of 1 minute. Deals 3 1d6 points of poison damage, but then provides a +2 bonus to AC for 1 hour. Cockerel Spider. Ingesting the spider causes the user's voice to deepen and become more threatening. Dark Wasp. The sting of this wasp injects a venom that deals 4 1d8 points of poison damage and improves the user's ability to resist the effects of certain types of damage. The Dolor Crabrow. The sting of a wasp injects a venom that deals 4 1d8 points of damage to the user and forces the user into an uncontrollable fury. Eye Leech. When the black leech is attached to the eyelid, it ingests a toxin that deals 3 1d6 points of poison damage, but the user's night vision is enhanced. Allows the user to gain 60 feet of dark vision and advantage on all sleight-based wisdom checks for 1d3 hours. Festerfew. User who eats a handful of these lice gains advantage on all saves versus disease and poison for 1d4 hours, but also must succeed on DC 15 Constitution saving throws or be stunned for 1 hour. Finger Lice. A user whose hands are bitten by the lice gains exceptional manual dexterity, but tiny maggots writhe under their skin. The user gains advantage on dexterity, but has disadvantage on strength checks. Fire Bite Lice. User bitten by lice gains exceptional agility, but the toxin causes the user to feel like they're on fire. Gadfly. Ambrosia. Consuming a paste made from the crushed remains of this fly provides a medium or smaller creature with sufficient water for 1 day. So, Devin is saying, ew. Well, I mean, ew, just out of the fact that, these people seem to be using insect ingestion and insect stings to gain the properties of different kinds of potions. Howling Nightshade Grubs. Sausage-sized grub tastes disgusting and howls when eaten. For the following day, the user has advantage on skill checks and Constitution saving throw made to resist non-lethal damage from exhaustion, starvation, thirst, to forced march, hot or cold environments, but becomes sluggish and has disadvantage on initiative rolls for the duration. The Hungering Wasp Grub, when eaten, this orange and black striped grub provides the user with advantage on saves versus poison for 24 hours. At the end of the duration, the user must succeed on a DC 16 Constitution saving throw or fall unconscious for 24 hours. And so, yeah, every one of these is also, kind of monkey paw wish is when it comes to status changes. Is that you have to be able to withstand, the saving throw after taking them, or you will succumb to something as a result of having eaten it. A Joy Scarab. The bite of the green scarab beetle injects a caution that instills intense feelings of elation and joy. The user gains advantage on saves versus emotion-altering effects for 4 hours. However, for the duration, the user fights only to defend herself. If the user interacted with or questioned while under the effects of the spell, she can only defend herself and may not attack. Though any advice answers she may be disjointed due to their euphoric states. Jub's Nasal Lice. The lice must be snorted into the nasal passage, or their bites grant the user advantage on wisdom perception checks that involve smell for 4 hours. For the duration, the user also has disadvantage on saves versus effects that would be inhaled, such as inhaled poisons and stench effects. It's fair. It's like uber dump stats, yeah. Catherington swan fleas. Some of the inventors of these, named them after themselves. The bites of these fleas inject a toxin that deals 1d6 points of poison damage, but the user gains advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws for 1 minute. Afterwards, they have to succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or have disadvantage on strength checks and saving throws for the following hour. Libidinous vermis. Ingesting this worm grants the user advantage on charisma checks for 4 hours, but also disadvantage on wisdom checks and wisdom saving throws. Lobotomy hornet. The sting of this hornet injects a venom that grants the user an advantage on the strength check and strength saving throws for 4 hours, but also disadvantage on intelligence checks and intelligence saving throws for the duration. Lucius spider, toxin that deals 3d6 points of poison damage, but user gains advantage on strength athletics checks for the following 4 hours. Misery slug. Eating this slimy black finger-long slug cures 1d8 points of damage at the beginning of a turn and at the beginning of their following turn. At the end of the duration, you have to succeed on a DC 12 Constitution saving throw or be blinded for 1 minute. Ochre lice. Eating a handful of these fat lice gains advantage on dexterity stealth checks for 2 hours, but the user has disadvantage on wisdom saving throws for the duration. The porous scrab. Consuming this crunchy bitter black beetle grants advantage on dexterity and strength checks for 1 hour, but if the user succeeds on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw. Failure results in the user vomiting up the remains of the beetle and being poisoned for 10 minutes. This is gross, but it's a really compelling mechanic. Rictus gnats. The bites of the gnats cause the muscle tone of the user's face to relax, making it hard to convey expressions or emotion. For 1 hour, if reduced to 0 hit points, it drops to 1 hit point instead. For the duration and 24 hours thereafter, the user's face remains devoid of expression, incurring disadvantage on charisma checks. Screaming maggot. The writhing bulbous magnet screams when eaten, dealing 3 1d6 points of thunder damage to the ingester, who also must succeed in a DC 12 Constitution saving throw or be deafened for 10 minutes. The user gains advantage on intelligence checks for 1 hour. The speed weevil. The venomous bite of the white weevil is applied to the chest near the heart, dealing 4 1d8 points of poison damage and granting the user an extra 10 feet of movement to the base walking speed for 2 hours. If the insect, thistle frenzy bug. If this insect is attached to the user's neck, its sharp claws inject toxins that deal 3 1d6 points of poison damage, but the user adds 1 to their AC while the bug remains attached. The bug remains attached for 3 hours while dropping off, but is forcibly removed before this time. The user must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or take 11 3d6 poison damage from a concentrated burst of venom. Wart lice. Ingesting these lice causes the user's skin to become malleable and flexible, granting advantage on charisma checks and checks involving a disguise kit for 4 hours. At the end of the duration, the user's skin forms ugly warts, imparting disadvantage on the charisma checks for 1d4 days before they disappear. A water crane. Eating a long, thin water insect gains the ability to breathe underwater for 1 hour. Once the user has breathed underwater, they must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw to be able to breathe air again, so long as the water-breathing duration is still in effect. If the user fails this saving throw, she is able to only be able to breathe underwater for 10 minutes or until the water-breathing effect ends, whichever is sooner. At this time, if the water-breathing duration is in still effect, the user can attempt another saving throw to be able to breathe air again. Lifestyle expenses. Live a life of luxury, eat well, drink the finest wines, and be seen in all the right places. In the Blight, how well you eat and how well connected you are can have a direct effect on the characters. Lifestyle expenses add detail to life in a filthy, crowded city such as the Blight. If you don't want to add to the minutiae of expenses, feel free not to employ this section. Costs of living are associated with a specific standard of living: destitute, poor, average, wealthy, extravagant, and decadent, detailed below. Give your players a general sense of the options and decide how they're going to spend their time and money. So yeah, this is effectively the same types of rating that you find in 5e. Let me see. Destitute requires the additions of disease from the disease table. Roll 1d10 after the first month of destitute living. A roll of 1 indicates that you have contracted the disease, and roll on the additional diseases table. The second month, a roll of 1 or 2 or d10 indicates that you've contracted a disease. Repeat this process for each month. So month 3 would be a result of 1, 2, and 3, or so far. Okay. The disease effects as per contagion with this add-on saving throw can be repeated after each long rest. If the save is made, the creature is cured and the effects made. And then there's a description for each disease. Black rot affects the skin and muscles of the victim, creating an accelerated gangrene process that turns the affected tissue to black and eats it away. Devil chills, an infestation caused by various devils, is typically non-fatal. Festering lung, creatures exposed to this disease must make a DC 16 Constitution saving throw or become infection. This gets then to the lungs of the affected creature and begins to break down the respiratory system. Gray ache. Upon exposure to this disease, creatures must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw or become infected. Leprosy. Slowly rots the flesh and numbs and stiffens limbs. Creatures exposed to this disease must make DC 17 Constitution saving throws or become diseased. The red ache. Living creatures make a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or become infected. Their skin will become red and bloated and warm to the touch. While infected, the creature has disadvantage on strength checks. Okay, and so that is absolutely destitute at 0. So then, they go on and they explain the other status ones. 5, poorness. At the end of each month, make a DC Constitution saving throw or take 1 point of Constitution damage. This damage can't be recovered except for magic healing or improvement by living standards for at least 1 week, during which it will heal normally. Average amounts. You have meat and ale occasionally, the odd night in the tavern, and generally your dress is fair. And then all the way to wealthy, extravagant, and decadent. The common names of the Blight. Examples of typical human names found within the Blight. There are many core names to be found within the city. Male names: Barbel, Joshua, Sorrel, Bethesomel, Kale, Spurge, Borgain, Loam, Tanner, Carbuncle, Luther, Tog. Female names: Anoka, Bernice, Blackberry, Bryony, Eliza, Elizabeth, Etty, Fogu, Grace, Happiness, Mercy, Myrnafel, Nan, Nightset, Poppy, Primrose. And surnames: Alderfly, Bedstraw, Blackfly, Blackhemp, Grindylow, Gutter, Hartwell, Hogweed, Pumple, Rake, Rast, Rowgate, Sedge, Sloth, Stoat. Yeah. Okay, so for the GM, happiness lies neither in vice nor in virtue. The advice given herein is aimed specifically at the Blight and running a rich, story-driven experience for you and your players. However, the theme within these and the Blight Player's Handbook, complex relationships, family, power, and other ambitions themes could fit well into any urban adventure path or indeed any other campaigns. Rich relationships and family that are at the center of many adventures set in out-of-the-way places. Betrayal can occur in the most remote spots and out-of-the-way places. Betrayal and the complex groups can stretch across the countryside, not just the streets. These rules and ideas don't suit every group, so use only what you think you and your players will enjoy. Finally, not everybody wants the complexity of followers, friends, powerful enemies, and shadowy sponsors. The Blight lends itself beautifully to the more classic role-playing campaign, too, with opportunities at every corner for adventuring. Whether it's robbing a cruel merchant, exploring the shifting jungles of the in-between, or fighting in the bear pits and sweat vats of the city's underbelly, a city is a great place to adventure. Using the Blight as a base for other adventures gives your players the opportunities to spend their cash on magic, pleasure, and on the dubious goods for sale here. Each Blight adventure and district offers options to further develop stories as sidebars, but at its core, simple adventure. The best campaigns to adventure paths are merely text without the input of a great GM and players to guide it and make it grow into something more. These groups often share their experiences on message boards and get into character in a way actors might be proud of. Immersing themselves in detail and complex handouts. On one occasion, I recall with particular fondness, actual food was prepared for part of the adventure. An adventure is not unlike food that is served as part of our game. A great adventure is not just about words, but deeds, and a good GM adds flavors to the worlds, spicing descriptions with sounds, sights, and smells to bring the whole life in a satisfying and fulfilling way. Caster Age pays serious attention to these senses, and each district of the city has a sight, sound, and smell section as part of it. Also included in each district is an additional section. What if the place feels like it's crowded or oppressive? Have an air of nervousness, excitement. Some GMs may find this detail too much and wish to simply play out events and areas as written. However, I include such detail because for many GMs, this can transform a game into an experience. Okay. The Blight, mundane, magic, or mythic. The Blight is a place like no other. It bleeds into other realms. It bludgeons its way into narrow alleys, and it slithers its way beneath other cities. The insidious, twisted domain of the in-between has a peculiar effect upon this place, and one that you may wish to think about before you run anything in and around the Blight. How does it work? As written, the Blight is a single place, a city made up of many parts to create a whole fantasy setting perched on the borders of reality within an extraordinary place between. You might not want that. You might want a district, a shop, or an NPC to come from here and nothing else. These places, and people might be mundane, parts of a whole, simply passers-by, or districts that have always existed in your city. You can, however, go for a more extraordinary answer. The Blight can literally exist between other places. A door in your city will lead to the Blight. A shop front backs into the between, or a tramp wanders the streets of your city and the Blight. If using this more magical approach, be careful how you choose to explain it. The between is in effect similar to a gate spell, allowing access between, but is much more fickle than that. You might not want such an explanation, however. Gate spells are generally very rare, and having too many presents its own problems. Instead, you might wish for the simplest of explanations. It's a mythical place whose very nature is inexplicable. Doors exist that connect to different places, but they are occasionally the view from an otherwise mundane window shows something completely random, and a character falls down a seemingly endless tunnel and ends up in the between, and therefore the Blight. A city for anywhere. A great thing about running a fantasy role-playing game is the flexibility that you have in determining detail. You can create vast volcanic ranges, deep ocean trenches, and huge floodplains. In short, you determine whole geographies. Once these ideas have been generated, you're then able to get the details. How high, how deep, how wide. The same goes for any fantasy city, and Caster Age is no different. I presented Caster Age as having a temperature climate, with extremes of winter and summer. However, it would be an easy task to adjust this. Some sections, such as the Black Ice Fair or Winter, would need to be reconsidered or removed, but the basic details can be altered quite simply. Caster Age could be at the equator in your world. The heat and squalor should therefore be emphasized. Later, the narrative with crushing ivy growing up the sides of decaying buildings, ravaged by the peculiar Caster Age stone mite, whose bite, of course, is painful and can kill babies. The river is sluggish and could become mudflats, lasting many months in the dry seasons. Flip the idea on its head, and Caster Age becomes a subarctic hell. The black water is frozen for many months. Here, the city dwells in a comatose, frozen, canker-shrouded blanket throughout the long, harsh winter. Other ideas can easily be weaved into the mix, even the exotic, such as Caster Age, standing on the edges of vast waterfall, falling into nothing, or along the last point of call before the burning ocean. Use this text as a canvas, not as a script. Size isn't everything. One of the most important decisions you may make to Wish is how Castle Age fits into your world. Is it the basis for an ongoing campaign, and thus the center of everything? Castle Age is depicted as a huge city and impossibly massive population at complete odds with a typical fantasy game setting. The population density is presented here as little greater than that of a borough of Manhattan at 70,000 people per square mile. Well, 77,000 people per square mile. However, despite its advanced technological state, compared with most of the world, Castle Age is by no means a modern city. It lacks towering skyscrapers, even though it has a multitude of precariously tall tenement buildings and a propensity to stack new construction haphazardly atop old construction, as in the Jumble and the Festival. Though the Festival and Town Bridge are not technically part of the city in the legal definition, their population numbers are included in the census here. In addition, although Manhattan has a multitude of skyscrapers, a great portion of the real estate is office space rather than residential space, at which Castle Age has only a fraction by comparison. In fact, the typical apartment or residence of Manhattan could be considered luxuriously roomy by better than 90% of the population of Castle Age, who settle for a single cramped room, garret, undercroft, stairwell, or doorstop that they call home. The Blight, of course, has only a ghost of the infrastructure of the modern Manhattan or London. However, even with the above consideration, the Blight's size is still virtually unbelievable in a contextual sense, like a swollen, blood-gorged tick always on the verge of rupture. This individual is particularly fixated on using insect metaphors. This is greatly accounted for Castle Age's own unique quality hinted at in the Between Tessellation description in the sidebox. In short, the city's proximity to Between creates a sort of vortex of sentience. This unique vortex consists of two principal features. Despite the appalling mortality rates and constant threats of danger and disease, Castle Age enjoys a subtle fecundity that ensures that the population can renew itself and not only sustain its numbers, but even grow despite the plagues, pestilence, and famine that frequently afflict the population on some scale. In addition, it seems to possess a strange form of unconscious mental. Those who are born in the Blight seldom leap. That's kind of an awkward sentence. In addition, it seems to possess a strange form of conscious mental. Yeah, that's the way that it reads. Even those who travel far away in the city's many colonies usually end up finding their way back home before all is said and done. This is no conscious compulsion. It just seems to work out that way more often than not. In addition, foreigners who travel to Castle Age and remain for any extended period of time stay permanently as well, part of a family, start a family, or raise the one that they brought with them and become a part of the city's ever-burgeoning populace. Again, it's not a conscious compulsion, and most anyone asked about it is a motivation would outright deny such a thing. But more often or not, that's how things turn out. It seems the Blight is hungry and never sated. If the population scale of Castle Age is simply too large for your campaign, simply use a drop of the number by an order of magnitude or only adopt the parts of the city that you really need. Okay. So, the flavor of the Blight. The descriptions of people and places gives you an overview of the city, its decaying parts, and its twisted alleyways, which are merely the main components to the dish. The true essence of the Blight also lies in its flavors, its smells, its atmosphere, and its spice. Appendix A includes a number of random lists included to give you some inspiration if you need any for the strange locales. It is hoped these lists inspire you to set up adventures, encounters, or even perhaps simple conversations within your own game. In addition, Appendix B includes a lexicon of terms common to the folk so that you can sprinkle it liberally throughout your campaign and let that living city feel. Bear in mind that the Blight is, of course, more than the sum of its parts, and that any twisted dark fantasy setting could have these elements. Over and above these flavors, there are a few more ideas to give you a taste of the city. I started titling this next section Mature Campaign Themes, but I'm not sure if that's the exact phrase. Mature can mean many things, but initially comes off across as sex, violence, drugs, or any other morally ambiguous themes. Those issues certainly have their place in the Blight, as it is a dark fantasy settings, but it's not what it's all about. The optional rules and ideas that follow are up for you to judge. Do they suit your style? Are they acceptable to your group? Or would they have a place with a slight alteration? How it all began. One of the most useful and inspiring RPG articles I've ever seen appeared in the pages of Imagine magazine, TSR UK's role-playing periodical that has been published during the decade of the 80s. Imagine features some articles about a homegrown campaign called Pellamore, and in some articles the City League, so called because it was a league across. The City articles fascinated me in their level of detail. They would describe everything from entertainments in the city to obscure corners and plazas from an incredible depth of a character and interaction. To me, they were the consummate way to describe a city, down to every street corner, every persona, and every obscure fact that always leaving space for development if the GM wished. TSR, sad to see what people using that name are doing it with these days. Well, I mean, in my opinion, it's not really even that you hear TSR anymore. You know, you're more likely to hear, you know, just the old chestnut that I'm always banding about, Wizards of the Coast, a subsidiary of Hasbro, you know, and hearing something about TSR making a comeback would actually be novel. I mean, it would be, you know, it would be interesting to hear, and it would be interesting to see how that would develop. So anyway, a long time ago, I was lucky enough to have an adventure published called The Styes in Dungeon Magazine number 121. I intended the place to be a simple one-off location for a single adventure, and as such, the setting was fairly small and provided scant details. I had read China Miéville's incredible Perdido Street Station shortly before writing it, and the amazing dark atmosphere Miéville created soaked into me. Reaction to the adventure was good, and James Jacobs suggested a sequel. I threw several ideas around. One eventually became The Weavers in Dungeon Magazine number 135. Also about this time, I began an adventure path with my own group based upon the Styes setting. The adventure path, loosely based around the Maltese Falcon, greatly expanded upon that original setting, and I soon realized that the Styes was not big enough for the players to explore, so other regions such as the Festival Town and the Spice Islands were incorporated. This is in turn expanded to what became a schizophrenic madness. The endless development that has been fed and nurtured in a dark attic as it slowly became the city-state of Caster Age. That the Styes now languishes unused by its owners frustrates me, but it has now given birth to a new monster, the Blight. So, in many ways, I'm grateful for its torpors. Inkiku, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm doing very well. Thank you for coming into the stream. Above all, the idea for this vast work owes itself to encouragement in my writing, both from message board posters and especially from the wonderful people at Paizo and Frog God Games. For without that and the kind words of many others, I would never have had the courage to undertake this project. It's also very important for me to thank the people who have taken the time to review my work, edit it, and suggest changes. I've looked at everything they've done, and I've hoped learn from them. Your suggestions and annoyances have helped me to improve in the past and continue to improve in the future, I hope. The project is therefore yours, and I hope that I can repay you by creating something to savor. Okay. Campaign, themes, and styles. Some groups play an incredibly deep and absorbing campaign. Others like to relieve the stress of their daily life by beating up orcs. Most games, ours included, prefer a balance of both. Masking a politician one week and slaughtering a group of goblins without dialogue the next. Linking adventures into themes through the characters is one way to bring your characters realistically together under a common bond. It's not for everyone. Some groups like to start and roll characters with total freedom, an elf monk here, a dwarf barbarian there, but sometimes a change of pace is good. It may not always be appropriate to do so, but occasionally ideas like the two below can offer a welcome change of place. Okay, so this is a single page table for the city-state of Caster Age. The player okay, that's the end of that paragraph. So we can actually look at this. Okay. The size is a metropolis, a population of 3,285,000, 67% of which are human. Casterhage, for all appearances, is a hereditary monarchy supported by a very powerful yet insular bureaucracy. Queen Alice is the ruler in name and title, with the Crown Justices, 3 powerful bureaucrats control vital areas of the trade, defense, and colonization. Behind the scenes, the puppet strings are pulled by a shadow syndicate named the Illuminati, who control the Crown Justices, but true supremacy rests within the Moriel, the twice-exiled seductress, manipulative archdevil who secretly rules from the shadows, plotting the course which he wishes Casterhage to take. So, let's see. Defense. Casterhage is protected by the City Watch and the Royal Armies under the command of Duke Malice, a cousin of Queen Alice. There is also a secret police force called the Knockers that rounds up anarchists, dissidents, and political enemies, and anyone seen as a threat to the status quo of the ruling elite. There's no limit to the goods and services illicit or licit available in Casterhage. Qualities: academic colonial power, holy sites magically attuned, notorious prosperous, racially intolerant at the lowest caste, and of strategic locations. Between tessellation, the area of the city of Casterhage has a unique property of being exceptionally close to a physical other reality called between. This creates all manner of unpredictable and dangerous manifestations within the city and its inhabitants. Colonial power: Casterhage possesses a vast network of global colonies from which it can draw economic and labor resources. And overpopulation: Casterhage has a massive population for the area, encompasses unparalleled elsewhere in the world. Its massive economic, colonial, and magical resources are the only things that stave off massive starvation. However, it also creates an unprecedented diversity, invitation, and labor base, causing a contradictory dichotomy of prosperity and poverty. Notable NPCs, I believe, yeah, exactly the same list as from the paragraph that we had just read. The player characters is part of the story. Having a theme to a group of characters can be a great way to commence and find a thread through a campaign. Are the characters all associated with the Thieves Guild? Are they all pirates or members of the same holy order? While theming a group is a powerful way to start a campaign, restrictive themes can soon become tiresome, so whilst using these themes, try to vary them. Perhaps one group of characters is indeed part of a holy order, but even such an order has more dubious associates. Isn't it true that even the best and most spotless law enforcers must associate with it, and occasionally or perhaps often deal with more dubious characters? Such a party could be made up of clerics of the order, supported by fighters, who, though initially allied to the order, could be disillusioned with it, or have a more selfish, profit-driven motivation for their alliance with a powerful religion. A rogue could easily be persuaded to join the order to assist in more dubious activities with nimble hands, and a head for heights is crucial. Having limitations of a race is occasionally interesting, and an all-gnome or dwarf party can make for an interesting campaign, but players often play their characters for a long time, sometimes many years, so be sure all of your players are happy with this option before you consider it. Below are 2 potential options for themed character groups. One is the Shadow of Freedom. Vile politicians, twisted royalty, greeting thugs rule a city. Against this backdrop, there is a movement taken called the Shadow of Freedom. Word spreads amongst the underclasses, and charismatic locals are sought to further the group's ends. This group doesn't want anarchy, they want freedom. Working class heroes and any class could easily be represented here, and rogues, fighters, and rangers could join forces with clerics, wizards, and a multitude of races. The binding arc for this party is to strike at the ruling classes in their corruption and outmass them. Adventures in this theme focus upon unmasking cruel overseers who use slaves and undead to work mills, revealing secret cuts hidden within the aristocracy, and stopping the filthy trade of golem making. Okay, the Guild and the Demiza, I think that's what it's called, the Guild and the Demezi. I said Demezi. The Guild and the Demiza. This party is more ambiguous and operates from a thieves' guild. This guild would be a group of swarthy but kind-hearted Dickensian rogues, or a bunch of street thugs who use brutality to achieve their ends, wealth, and power. The power they seek is an object, a mask that grants incredible charisma and arcane power to whoever wears it. Sadly, the wrong person has it. A young witch by the name of Demelza, female high elf witch. The campaign arc begins her actions within the Great Coven, which is threatening to burst apart, but small ripples in the great pool of the city. Not the worst extras I have available. Absolutely true. So reading about, the mask of incredible charisma and arcane power. Anybody thinking the same thing that I'm thinking? Smoking! Somebody stop me! The binding view theme here is greed and power. The characters face the wrath of the law and rival gangs as they seek to establish their own patch of the city. Perhaps even their own guild eventually. Adventurers focus on daring heists, dashing rooftop classes from sadistic grounds, and working on a city district to establish a base of operations. As the campaign begins to take on more of a structure, the characters learn that Demelza's cohorts are thriving right under their own feet in the underneath. She has fled from her own kind and has entered the bowels of the city to regroup. Stinking! Somebody wash me! The Great Coven cares nothing about who gets in the way, and the locals are suddenly frozen with terror as night visitors and other things cavort across the rooftops. Unfortunately, the characters are caught between the two factions, and whatever action they take is construed by the other as treachery. As Demelza becomes more desperate, she dabbles with darker and more powerful devils. And soon these two are at large in the character's patch. More powerful aspects of all the different groups are brought together for a final confrontation in the vast aspects below the city. The characters has the whole story. Another option to modify the character's background to something extraordinary. In this way, a group of characters may become the focus of the campaign. This option ends with a very strong connection between the characters and the setting. It may, however, require the GM to flesh out the adventures accordingly, or modify published adventures with his own theme. In taking this approach, is vital to raise questions at each turn, justify why the events are happening, and seek answers. The following are two simple quirks from the Night Player's Handbook that are used as examples for this process. The noble's bastard, far from being just any normal, it is a highborn priest who has fathered the character. The character is the bastard offspring of Justice, the Lord Alfred Quint, master of humors. The characters are brought together for some collective reason, perhaps to aid the unwanted further or to thwart him. How do events proceed from here? Does the Justice know of the characters and judge them to be relevant or crucial? Do the Justice's enemies know of the characters and consider them to be valuable tools for future plots? Does the character hate the Justice, having been brought up as an orphan? The child of a famous beauty. The famous beauty the character's parent may be, but looks are only skin deep. The character is a child, not of one beauty, but many, a cult of witches that were each burned at the stake a long time ago. Now the characters have been brought together for the same reason. In truth, the witch's child has already infected his friends, the other characters with his arcane sickness, and their fates are now intertwined. With cult mothers sold the souls of their children to the devil, whose cohorts some collecting on the first child the same day. The first child is an NPC who brings her kin together to fight back against the devil. She tells the characters that they must stick together or risk a fate worse than death, but soon after the campaign begins, she vanishes and soon the devil's cohorts begin to appear. You can modify these quirks to entertain characters, or all of them as you wish, giving them a ready-made focus and enemy at the start of things to hang your campaign on, or add existing adventures to give them a professional touch. Characters of different races and ages present different challenges, but having the group begin as friends of a particular NPC is always a good starting point. Okay, the casts. Casts are about birth and breeding, and something that a clever person can easily use to her advantage. How can you play this option depends on how much you make of cast issues. Some find them abhorrent, and prefer to play with them out of the way. That's fine, just have it playing along in the background. The royalty looks down on the upper class, who look down on the middle class, who frown on the lower caste. If you wish to make a simple rule, then the gap between each gap between each caste is reflected in a penalty for social interaction. That is deception, intimidation, and persuasion checks. The penalty for each separation of castes is 2. So a common man trying to persuade an upper-class banker does so at a DC plus 4, simply because the banker mistrusts him and vice versa. A character can fake a higher caste simply by use of deception. A check is made at plus 2 for the first separation and plus 4 for the next. A member of the royal family covertly trying to join the lower caste anarchist group does so at a plus 4. As a GM, you might want to play up stressful situations. Caste might be a good way to enhance role-playing situations, but it may also not be your cup of tea. As ever, use it or not as you wish. The bottom line is this, and many other fantasy settings, is that power rules. If the characters get caught in the royal palace and end up before Alicia, the little queen, and she yells, "Off with their heads," then unless the characters escape, they've had it. That is not to say, however, that a lord ordering his serf to chop his hand off expects him to do so. Making an enemy of a sir or lord may bring the characters trouble in a different way. However, he's likely to have plenty of powerful friends, plenty of money, and plenty of influence. Perhaps he's friends with the local watch captain and can be assured that the characters are harassed or followed, or his house is never guarded. Real places with bright flavor. Though the Blight is fiction, a sheer folly of the improbable, its roots run deep in the real world. I can't help but picture these places from which her inspiration has been drawn when I crack open the pages or dust off the keyboard to revisit the old girl. The main places I always have on the back of my mind when delving into the Blight phase in Morocco, one of the true few medieval cities left in the world, and of course London, Venice, New York, and Cambridge all also lurk somewhere within the streets of the city-state as well. Fae is a meandering confusion of alleys and footpaths, steep, narrow streets, and the residence of human work. The call to prayers is something to be experienced as they echo across the city. It would be churlish to deny that there's a lot of London in the Blight. Its many names and inspirations are from the city, twisted and spat down on this setting for your enjoyment. Peter Ackroyd's incredible London, the Biography, is the best book I've ever read about the capital, and it is a goldmine of great ideas. Okay. Caste characteristics. For those who really wish to immerse their campaigns into the injustice of caste in class, here are some characteristics you may wish to make available to characters. Only one caste characteristic can be chosen per character, and that choice is made when a character is created. Each castle characteristic is associated with one or two specific castes, and then be taken only by those of a proper caste. The feat is physically manifested in the body of an individual as much as his actions. So, hidden by deception checks as detailed above, as etiquette is so richly bound with grace and breeding in the Blight, so caste is also accent, education, and demeanor. Therefore, simple spells such as Alter Self still will require a charisma deception check to pull off the charade when speaking as no one from a different castle. Note to the GM, these are intended for immersion. If they do not fit within your game, then definitely ignore them, tweak them, or feed them. Or alter them however best works for you and your players. Okay. Laboring caste, low folk of invisibles. You have broad shoulders and a harsh, coarse appearance. You can apply your proficiency bonus to all deception. Intimidation and persuasion checks within your caste, regardless if it is proficient in the skill or not. You have exceptional strength from working as a laborer all your life. You are proficient in strength athletics. Gable cast, low folk, or invisibles. You have long, clever fingers and slightly longer arms, as your head has a slight upward tilt to its deportment. You can apply your proficiency bonus to all deception, intimidation, and persuasion checks, regardless if proficient in the skill or not. You're incredibly dexterous and can gain proficiency in sleight of hand. Galing cast to the low folk, you bear the tamed, weather-worn skin of your castle, and strong, broad hands. You can apply your proficiency to all deception, intimidation, and persuasion checks within your cast, regardless if you are prominent in the skill or not. You have spent your life on the water and know the ins and outs of sailing. You are proficient in water vehicles. Expert cast, the middle class. You have the quick and wits and immense concentration of the middle class, but bear the worry lines and bags under your eyes of the one always beset by the worries and weight of an unforgiving world. Educated cast royal. Benefit. You can apply your proficiency bonus to all deception, intimidation, and persuasion checks within your cast, regardless if proficient in the skill or not. Educated cast. You have the highbrow and piercing state of an educated person. You can apply your proficiency bonus to all deception, intimidation, and persuasion checks within your cast, regardless if proficient in the skill or not. So, up until this point, we've been reading a GM's guide. And so it occurs to me that, the author has run a multitude of different types of campaigns using this exact same settings. So effectively what this book is it's a giant compilation of ways that you can roleplay, and it has an enormous focus on background. So what we're reading right now is it's just a completely different way of looking at background than what existed in the straight up background section. Something that would be played in an extremely focused campaign, such as a campaign that deals almost exclusively within a royal family and aristocracy setting, and wherein, really just the characteristics of any type of individual that might exist in the aristocracy has the benefit of it just based on their innate personality, their passive looks, their tendency to have certain kind of body quirks. And so, yeah, that is interesting. And that is, a completely different way of, looking at how you might potentially roleplay a game within this setting. Duels are common in the Blight amongst all classes and castes, and they're a good way to settle matters without them getting messy. They are a commonplace way to resolve issues that are likely to otherwise result in a protracted campaign and ultimately death. They can also be very exciting to roleplay. Duels are illegal, but to follow a very strict set of guidelines, duels are to first. The first wound to a participant ends the duel. Second, where the loss of 75% of hit points ends the duel. Third, where the fight goes on until one person is brought down to 0 hit points. Or fourth, to the death, where the character is killed outright by the other duelists. Duels are always fought on neutral ground, and weapons are either melee or ranged. Sometimes magical duels are fought. Seconds are used to act as assistants to the duelists, and sometimes it may be agreed that seconds also participate. All duels require the services of a referee. Many duels, the first and second, are accompanied by a wager, often a considerably large wager that the loser hands over the sum without a complaint. Cheating, reneging on a wager, or other such despicable acts soon led to an establishment of a reputation. And then there are some duelist clubs and guilds, most notably the royal duelists, who seek out cheats and then duel them, or simply murder them. Those who play fairly and honor the traditional rules of dueling are respected even by their enemies. And speaking of enemies make a great campaign. A recurring villain can generate stronger feelings than the toughest monster, and having someone who can outsmart the characters from time to time is a good way of leveling the playing field for your campaign. However, recurring villains come with some warnings. Don't overdo them, and don't make them omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent. Base your villain on logic bound by the same rules your character have, and they'll work fine. A good recurring villain should have a way out, but one based on sound game sense. A potion of gaseous form or a scroll of flying are both good methods to use, but hold your monster villain to the same rules the character has, and be prepared for your characters coming after them. The predictable garbage truck pulling out of a side alley at the last minute to unintentionally block a pursuit should be reserved only for your worst game sessions. Ergo, always be prepared that your villain may in some way be caught or killed. In the same way that a master villain makes a great addition to some campaigns, do so more mundane enemies great and small, from individuals to guilds, cults, and monsters, bring another dimension to play. However they come across, more work for you as the GM. Enemies have actions, lives, lairs, and possibly friends and enemies of their town. And you must decide early on how much work you're prepared to do. A simple basic villain, such as a cult, is an easy way to start. As the characters kill cultists, other more powerful cult leaders hear about it and try to eradicate the characters. Eventually, the clues lead to a showdown and a good campaign ending. A more complex issue would be a group of anarchists. The relationships within that group are complex, and perhaps some allies are also partly enemies. The characters could even side with their enemies temporarily to attack a greater mutual foe. Although, can anyone be trusted in such a complex situation? An optional rule, the enemies as a penalty. Just as Part 3 introduced the idea of friends and characters as part of the creation process, the Blight also offers the possibility of introducing enemies into their lives and the idea of enemies as a penalty. In a thriving, vibrant place like a city, there is generally no cause without effect. You almost always reap what you sow. You may wish to allocate enemies at the start of their careers at the same way they come into the story with friends. Bear in mind the relative strengths and importance of starting level characters when deciding their enemies. And again, just don't think of individuals alone. Perhaps the character is part of a family that wronged an NPC, or maybe what he stands for, and for whom he works to are abhorrent to an NPC who was once a friend. You might occasionally wish for such an enemy to be incredibly powerful, however. Setting off a campaign being hated by Duke Tame makes for an interesting twist to any campaign. Tame is not omnipotent but has tough friends, and adventure with starting a group of constables kicking in the character's door to arrest them for heresy could provide some lively play. However, it requires additional work on your part to either explain why Duke Tame doesn't continuously pursue the characters once they escape, or explain how the characters are repeatedly able to avoid his efforts. Heretic! Heretic! We're in the street calling this man a heretic. Imprison them immediately. They have done heretical things. Something I feel like, wouldn't even work in the modern world, because, who even really knows what a heretic is? Another less font-heavy option is to never throw away a good villain. If the characters defeat a villain on an adventure, but don't make sure that he is dead, it is very easy again that same villain will have a revenge motive against the characters. Likewise, even if there are more thorough in their administrations against the said villain, perhaps they have some well-connected friends of their own who might spring to have them raised or perhaps saved at the very a brink of death, only to be transformed into the alchemic undying. In a place like the Bolt, the options for a long term of reappearing from the past are almost limitless, and the characters advance in level, power, and influence. A good villain should do the same with the expansive resources and alliance to be found in the city. For instance, if during an adventure like the characters kill Ronman, the were-rat cultist, unless they take precautions to keep his death a secret, his sister Campion hears about it. 1d4 days later, Campion, the mistress of the Ashen Lantern, female human were-rat burglar, is part of the cult of the Elder One, and commands followers, most of whom were rat rogues or clerks. Campion loved her brother and immediately becomes an enemy of anyone who took part in the raid that ended in his death. Based in Festival, her lair is a festering vat of filth, filled with her victims. Campion begins her enmity by stalking individual characters, finding their homes, and preparing to attack the ones who live alone. And of course, all this plays out as the backdrop to whatever new adventure the characters happen to be undertaking. Fads of the Blight. Fashion shift almost daily within the chic circles of the Blight, and one day's fad is tomorrow's cast-off. The most current fads are listed below, although they can change as quickly as a wind. Art as cruelty or cruelty as art. The Surrealist Club delights in using pain as art, and while some of these groups are more than sadomasochists, others are much more sinister. The use of flesh for art is unsettlingly common in the Blight, and is fast attaining a cult following. Now we know why we have the Bohemian subclass. The creation of art from broken living flesh is something that has coincided with the cult of Nagathu within the city, who are able to keep victims alive whilst lacerating and filleting them. A scattering of notable groups, including the revolting Panacea, have risen in recent times in order to indulge in this travesty. Of course, there are always some who imitate art, and the rise in sadistic serial killings often involves the lacerating of flesh, has soared recently. Goblin pets and awakened animal. The latest fashionable accessories to be seen with are goblin pets and awakened animals, almost always dressed in the imitation of humans, seen frequently in the Blight and command a high price. Kept on a chain and regarded with some amusement, the creature has learned that if it behaves to amuse, it is not hurt. Awakened animals learn very quickly, and some have surmised that every single cat in the Blight is awakened. Goblins tend to be slower to learn, but are no less comedic in the eyes of the elite, that as they make their ineffectual attempts to resist or win their freedom. A good goblin pet or awakened animal able to perform tricks fetches at least 200 gold points. Those who are more astounding fetch even higher prices. The garbled poet, a goblin that quotes poetry, was recently the subject of a 2,000 gold point bid from a collector, a bid that was refused by his current owner. The whispered idea that these goblins somehow steal out of their homes at night and meet below at the streets of the city has been roundly ridiculed by all parties, but it's only a matter of time before the truth of the situation comes to light at a most disagreeable spectacle. That's awful. It must really suck to be a small creature in the Blight. And add into that the fact that they had also just said every single cat is also considered to be an awakened creature. So, cats in whatever form that they take, are also capable of being as intelligent as a goblin and treated in the same manner, And so it is, well, when we had actually read the very first section, we had talked about, sentient, intelligent, playable races that are also have the exterminator frequently called on them. So, it definitely is something, that kind of works within the framework of a game that's supposed to be especially macabre. And, taking it from the player character's perspective, it is very likely that, they're going to want to seek justice for even the smallest of creatures. Probably something akin to the house elves in Harry Potter. But, suffice it to say that, the mechanics are built into here. You have the choice whether to use them or not, and so on and so on. I think I'm going to just be able to finish this page, and then we're going to go ahead and sign off. Okay. Macabre fashions. Aristocrats get bored very quickly and require the very latest indulgences and fashions, partaking in an almost frenzied desire to be seen in the right places by the right people, wearing the right clothes. A macabre fashion has grown recently that has accentuated the wearing of undead objects as clothing or accessories. Animated insects are the usual choice, but unliving skulls are also seen as de rigueur amongst the higher families. A small selection of such objects follows. Earrings, unliving undead moss set on silver hasps, a stole fox composed of a torpid undead fox, a cape made of ghoul flesh, a wedding gown with egret feathers accented by carved monkey bone swans, or a scarf made of human hair. The cults, the guilds, the cults, and the clubs, the guilds, the cults, and the gangs. Making a foe of an individual can be dangerous, cunning, or powerful. Individuals may stalk and attack characters when they're at their most vulnerable, or hire assassins or any other killers to do so on their behalf. Far more dangerous, however, are cults, groups, kinsmen, and gangs, for these are unlikely to have deeper resources and can make multiple attacks upon their enemies. On the other hand, membership in such groups can make for a powerful ally, or perhaps not so powerful allies that create more of a hassle than a benefit. Most groups don't necessarily advertise what weaknesses and liabilities they possess, while certainly overseeing their strengths. In any case, whether friend or foe, the myriad groups the characters could become associated with provide you with the endless opportunities for mayhem, mystery, and even some mirth. Some cults may also operate as clubs, and some guilds may operate as gangs, or in the case of the guild, be composed of many, many different gangs. You can typically determine whether a group stands opposed to a character, or as an organization that a character would potentially want to join and then handle the representation of that group accordingly based on the information provided in the section. For general purposes, cults and gangs are presented as adversarial groups, and clubs and guilds are organizations that might be something the characters would be interested in gaining membership. Clubs. Unlike guilds, clubs are relatively easy to join, rise within, and leave. These organizations all have a prerequisite to join, a membership benefit, sometimes, but not always, a special feature, and with the addition of an advancement protocol. Unless otherwise noted, or as in the case of secret clubs, an individual may not be a member of one or more than his club at a time. While a member may be in good standing, the character gains all the benefits of club membership, but these are lost as soon as that membership dissolves. However, at that point, the individual is free to begin membership with a new club. Many clubs require an annual fee. If that fee is not paid, the member is placed on probation and no longer gains the benefits of the club. The individual can come off probation simply by paying overdue membership and become a member in good standing again with the normal benefits. These are the thousands of different clubs within the city-state of Castorage, some enormous and influential, some small and virtually unknown. A few sample clubs are provided below for you to serve as a template for other clubs that you might wish to introduce to your campaign. So, let me see, we're on page 47 now. When we resume reading this next week, we're going to begin with the descriptions of the different kinds of clubs that you can join in Castorage and the Blight. Pretty good progress. Yeah, pretty good progress indeed. All right, so we've gotten up to page 50 of what is a 200 book, so that puts us exactly at 1/4 of the way through. So, who knows what the last few pages look like and so on. But at any rate, we're going to continue to read about the Blight when we resume Tabletop Lore next week. But I digress. Thank you very much once again for tuning in to Brainy the RPG Cat. As usual, this stream is brought to you by The Well of the Worlds. Sign up for The Well of the Worlds Kickstarter, written by Michael Serbrook and published by Rem Alternus and Mobius Worlds Publishing. Be sure to get on the mailing list so that you can be prepared for the official Kickstarter launch on April the 4th. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'd like to take a moment, and I would like to do a raid. Let's see. All right. So, let me see. Who would I like to visit right now? They might be good. Also, possibly. Okay, so we're going to go over to Code Channel. Right now they're in the middle of playing Valheim, so that should probably be interesting to watch. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm going to be back this Wednesday with the premiere of One Shots from the Meowing Portal, Episode 6. And so that's going to be pretty awesome. We worked really hard on this. I'm looking very forward to presenting to you the story. Thank you, everybody, once again for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody. And thank you very much for watching.